Hello, my name's Tom Stapleton, and I've got another in my series of talks and slideshows on behalf of the Friends of Williamson's Tunnels. This time, it's going to be about the Smithdown Lane Stableyard. We're going to look at it from Williamson's day right up until the present. This is an area that I'm not nearly as familiar with because the area is now looked after by another organisation altogether and not the Friends of Williamson's Tunnels. So we go back to not quite to Williamson's day. We don't have any real information about what was going on in Williamson's day exactly, but I believe that in the very early days, from when he came up to Edge Hill and started building and quarrying, in about 1806, there was an area here depicted on this painting by William Herdman off Smithdown Lane, which is just on the lower ground below Mason Street, where Williamson built most of his houses. In this painting, you can see what's supposed to depict Williamson buildings up on Mason Street on the higher ground. And by this time, I think William Herdman was painting these scenes in around 1858. So a few years after Williamson died in 1840. But obviously, it will have looked still very much as it did in Williamson's day. You can still see one of his larger tunnels in the background. Several of Herdman's paintings show a massive tunnels behind there. I've shown some of them myself in other slideshows. But obviously other people took over various areas here and used them for businesses. What does this one say? J.H. Jones Cooperage. I'm sure a lot of businesses were using these pieces of land which had been Williamson's workyard. In his day, all the stone that he quarried would have been brought down to his workyard. It would have been cut and shaped and dressed for whatever purpose it was going to be used for. Carpentry work and all the rest of it, because he was building lots of houses on Mason Street at that time. Anyway, a few years later, after Williamson's death, the area of land down here was taken over by Liverpool Corporation, and they had a scavenger's yard, and these were the forerunners of the city cleansing department. They went round the city collecting the rubbish, and I believe they were bringing rubbish back to this particular area, sifting it, separating it and reusing whatever could be used. This was sort of recycling long before recycling had been invented. Anyway, eventually they decided to build a yard here. This was in 1867. They built quite a big depot, and this is Smithdown Lane here, and this row of buildings were the frontage of what became the city stableyard, central stables for the Liverpool Corporation, built from around 1867. Might have been over a period of 2 or 3 years, I suppose. And these buildings on the frontage housed, well, a couple of them were houses. I think there was a horsekeeper's house, and later on there was a coachman's house. There may have been a vet's house, and also I think these were 2 houses, and then at that end they became offices for the corporation workers there. And this was a stable building, edge on to the street. At this end, on the north end of the yard, these were 2-story stables below, and probably haylofts in the upper story. And it was quite a big business. I believe that at one time up to 18 heavy horses were stabled at this depot, and these horses would have been used with carts that went all around the city, bringing the rubbish back here to start off with and sifting it. Later on, perhaps they were taking it to landfill sites as we do today. But anyway, this went on for many, many years. It must have been quite a busy depot. And of course, everything had to be done within this depot involved with looking after horses and maintaining them, keeping them healthy and fit. And this is that north end building with the road off to the left there. Some of the stable units were in in the ground floor of this building, and obviously haylofts above. And this went on for many, many years. But eventually, they moved away, and the yard was left to a slightly different use, but connected. The Lord Mayor's coach and horses were stabled here. This is a picture of the Lord Mayor's special coach, and it's coupled up to two of his very special horses that used to draw it around the city on special occasions, no doubt. And I believe there was a set of 6 of these horses. Probably they only used 2 at a time, as far as I can tell, but they had a full set of 6 of these horses. They would have had very special treatment and been very well looked after, I would imagine. And I believe the coachman here occupied one of the houses on the frontage. So he was on the job, and the vet was on the job. I believe they were also using the place as a stud. They were breeding horses here, and the vet had a lot of work to do. No doubt there was a blacksmith's on the premises as well. So quite a thriving, busy place. And training of the horses would take part on this cobbled yard in the middle. I believe that also at that time, the only other occupants of the buildings or the site were 2 Rolls-Royce cars as used by the Lord Mayor. So those and the 6 horses and the carriage were all that were left. And as you can see by this photo, I'm not quite sure when this is. This could be right up to about 2000. The place was becoming derelict, falling into disrepair. I'm not quite sure of the story of this, but I believe this is the very last horse to have been stabled here on the site. And I'm going to assume that this is the same horse. This one, I believe, was called Pop. Looks as if it could be the same horse, but can't be sure. And Pop is there with Steve Moran, one of our important founder members and one of the first people to rediscover the Williamson Tunnels on this site all those years ago in about 1995 or 1996. So this stable yard, surrounded by buildings on 3 sides. On the roadside, the north side, 2-story stables you've seen there, and a set of single-story stable blocks on the south side, had a steep hillside behind, rising quite steeply up to Mason Street. And so it was completely surrounded. Quite apart from the buildings, there were high gates and fences, and not much could be seen inside. The corporation moved away. It became derelict. Nobody was using it. Nobody gave it a thought. And it just started to get overgrown, as you can see here. Lovely old buildings in their time, but they're really suffering now. I'm going to whiz through a whole series of these pictures just because I've got them and I rather like them. This photograph shows the 2 single-story blocks of stables, rather nice buildings, but becoming really dilapidated at this point. And you wouldn't know it there, but behind that mass of trees is the great big opening of Williamson's double tunnel, which hadn't been discovered yet. But around 1995 or 1996, I think, the council finally made the decision that they were going to, well, they were never going to use this area again, and they decided they were going to sell this land off for redevelopment. And around this time, a handful of people, mostly on their own, independently, remembered some story about these tunnels within this yard, and people started gaining entry, is the phrase, breaking in, if you like, perhaps, or maybe slithering down the bank at the back through the undergrowth and finding their way in here just to have a nose around and see if they could find any sign of these old tunnels that had been completely forgotten about. You can see how overgrown it was, and once you were in there, I don't suppose anybody would have a clue. You could move around and go wherever you liked, and nobody would see you from the road or from behind. But this is a view of it looking down from the roof of the police station, just on the other side of Smithdown Lane. Quite a handy viewing spot that. We've had quite a few good photographs taken from up there when our people were allowed to go up and photograph it. So you're now looking at the portal of Williamson's double tunnel, the first thing that springs out and shows itself when you get into that yard. These are the two single-story stable blocks. The land, the green land behind here with Mason Street behind it, was covered with back-to-back housing and a little street down here that was called Congress Street. It had all been flattened, all gone, and when we started to get an interest in the Williamson Tunnels and started researching, we realised from what we found that there is a mass of Williamson underground structures underneath this land. But unfortunately, in no time at all, they put up a lot of three-storey flats on top of that land. Whether they completely destroyed the tunnels under there or not, I'm not sure. But they're lost to us now for many years, obviously. So the double tunnel was obviously the first draw for the people who found their way in here. Full of rubble as they all were, but it got people's imaginations going, and these first explorers were absolutely determined that this lot should not be lost forever when the builders moved in and bulldozed everything away. So a pressure group was formed, and they fought it, fought the council, fought the developers, and they had some success. In the end, two sections of tunnels here were saved and became the Williamson Tunnels Heritage Centre, which is run by the Joseph Williamson Society, who are working sort of alongside us while we look after the two other sections. And it was a real mess in those days. You can see how bad it was. But although the Stableyard was sold to developers and everything else was flattened, the two tunnels poking out of the hillside, this one and a corner tunnel just behind there, were saved. And eventually they did become the Tunnels Heritage Centre. And the single-story stable blocks were saved as well. So through these few years, people started taking a lot more interest, a lot more notice, bringing visitors down. This here is one of our founder members, Bill Douglas, who's obviously brought a party of people in here to have a look round. I think this is the entrance to the corner tunnel. And I think that's Frank Hodges, one of the big names in FOWT, no longer with us, but did an awful lot of work to help us secure the lease on our Paddington site, among other things. And we kept bringing people in and showing them, and kept researching Joseph Williamson and fighting the council. And eventually the decision was made somehow or other that the tunnels could be saved, the ones that could be seen anyway. And this is probably at the start of the clearance work. There was an awful lot of material inside there. You couldn't see very much to start off with, like all the Williamson tunnels that we've ever discovered. But they obviously had a little earth mover there that made the job a little bit faster, and they dug an awful lot of material out. And that's looking out from inside the double tunnel. And got a couple of shots here now of the other one, the corner tunnel. I don't think the entrance to the corner tunnel looks particularly big, but once you move inside, it's actually quite enormous. And all of our people from FOWT and the Joseph Williamson Society were working together as volunteer diggers at that time, quite happily working to open this place out. It was only after this was complete and the Heritage Centre opened up that we sort of parted company and did our separate things. But this has been an enormous job to clear this out. Both of the tunnels, the corner tunnel and the double-decker tunnel, go a long way back under the hillside behind. And in fact, they go almost as far as Mason Street itself. Yeah, there's one of our old timers, Eric Cope, who died only recently in the corner tunnel. He spent many, many years working with us and working with them, working at both sites. That again is the rear part of the corner tunnel. Quite impressive. And after all this hard work, it was eventually opened up as a tourist attraction. And that is what it became. big glass-fronted building there has been built over the entrance of the double tunnel. And they ended up with a cafe in there, I think. And the cobbled yard has survived, but while all that was going on, all the rest of the buildings were being demolished. This is looking down the cobbled yard between the two main single-story stable blocks towards that point there, which is the entrance to the reception area. And from the back of the reception area, you go through big wooden doors and you're into the corner tunnel. And then the tour takes you right back in the corner tunnel, and then you cross over through a man-made structure, tunnel, if you like, which joins the two together at the rear. And then you come out back through the double tunnel and back out to the big glass-fronted building. So fortunately, there was enough money spent on this to put up that glass-fronted building, to renovate these stable blocks, which are really very nice. They have their reception area and their toilet facilities and cafe, and I think these are used for storage. So while all that was going on, all the other stable buildings and the houses on the frontage were gradually being demolished, and flats were being built on them, 3-story flats. We did try to fight this. It was fighting a losing battle, quite honestly. This is where the houses stood fronting onto Smithdown Lane. And after they'd gone, you can see here, this is the roof of one of the tunnels. And this one is quite impressive. In fact, it's built from rows of sandstone blocks interspersed with several rows of bricks. I've shown you something similar that we found on the Merseyflex site when we unearthed a big chamber there. Quite impressive, and we were fighting them, really. It was supposed to be done in an archaeological manner and trying to do the job without destroying anything that lay below ground, but it was all so rushed, and there was really very little effort made to preserve what lay below, unfortunately. You can see there are foundations of all sorts here, from buildings going way back to the early 1800s, but it was all built on a 3-story block of flats went above this land here, fronting onto Smithdown Lane, and the two-level 2-story stable block at the north end is still standing, but eventually that was demolished as well, and another big block of flats went up on it. The last of that row of stable buildings is on its way down there, not very much left. But fortunately, a great chunk of the old stable yard, you can still imagine the horses clip-clopping across that stable yard, can't you? And many horses' hooves would have been moving over there, training horses, moving horses and carts in and out. A lot of history there. But fortunately, the triple-decker tunnel, which I've spoken about before, still lies below this cobbled yard, running along there. A lot of damage to it, but it's still intact in many places. So there's still hope that we'll be able to get back into there, or the people working for the Joseph Williamson Society one day will be able to get back in there. It's under there now, and it's still worth going into and exploring. It may be worth repairing areas to make them more accessible. They're not accessible to the public at the moment, but it could be one day. So at least they have survived. I think there are other tunnels leading off the Great Tunnel coming down here across the yard. And because this cobbled yard is still intact all the way from the days of the stable yard in 1867, I think it means that hopefully a lot of those tunnels below that ground are still intact. This is what it looks like now. I'm afraid the Tunnels Heritage Centre is really hidden, tucked away there behind this block of flats on the frontage of Smithdown Lane, and it's not easy to see that there's anything there, to be honest. They have a sign up, but they're well tucked away. Anyway, that basically is the story of the stable yard. it has been spoken about many times before, but I thought it was worthwhile, even though it's not part of what we look after, it was worthwhile looking into, because it's all part of the story of how the Williamson Tunnels came back from the dead, quite honestly. Certainly because the council decided that they were going to sell the land for redevelopment, that people started sitting up and taking notice and rediscovering them all, and the rest is history. So that's just about all I've got to tell you on that one. So thank you for watching.